December 15th, 1967. The silver bridge that stretches across the Ohio River in West Point, Virginia collapses, claiming the lives of 46 people. Rewind 13 months. It's midnight on November 15th, 1966. Two couples are driving through the woods together, when suddenly their headlights illuminate a 7-foot-tall, black figure. The creature was described as having a man-shaped body and an 8 to 10-foot wide set of wings, as well as glowing red eyes. This creature would be deemed a cryptid and given the title of the MOTHMAN.
Keep the blade in the sock, not the kind of use a mop, but he'll do it for the money. Crewman need to stop sipping Tito's on the rocks. When he do it on the job, it make the disrespect funny.
So for the sake of my exploration about whether or not the Mothman can exist from a biblical perspective, I'm going to be adopting John Keel's stance that the Mothman was prophetic or that he was some kind of omen. I am going to be excluding John Keel's ultra-terrestrial theory because I think that's a little unhinged. But since his is the most popular and most widespread theory, it's the one that I'm going to be adopting. A quick rundown for those that aren't familiar. John Keel was a paranormal journalist who explored the sightings of the Mothman. He put forward the idea that since the Mothman was sighted for a year leading up to the Silver Bridge's collapse, and then wasn't sighted again afterwards, that it must have been an omen warning people about the tragedy that was coming. So given the Mothman's sort of monstrous appearance, the instinct might be to assume that Mothman is a demon. And well, no one would blame anyone for assuming that because in pop culture, demons are portrayed as this sort of monstrous, terrifying creature. But the reality of demons is that they're scary because they're not scary. They're unassuming creatures that try to convince you to sabotage yourself by making things like sin seem appealing and trying to tempt you into it. This can be seen in multiple stories of the Bible. One of them is Genesis 3, the story of the first sin. In Genesis 3, the serpent approaches Eve and makes the fruit of knowledge very tempting to her by saying that she can be like God. Of course, that results in Eve dying, and in Adam dying, and in all of us dying. And so, really what the serpent did, the demon that was presenting as the serpent, what it did was it tempted Eve into sabotaging herself, into bringing herself down. Another story is in Matthew 4. And in this story, Satan tempts Jesus. See, Satan can't just outright attack Jesus because Satan's not powerful enough. So instead, Satan has to tempt Jesus so that he can be king of everything and try to get him to bring himself down. That's what these demons do. They don't present as these big monstrous creatures. Even the scariest thing about demons, which is possession, they can possess you, take over your body. Even possession is a tool that they use to get people to self-sabotage. This is illustrated by the legion of demons that Jesus encounters. They ask that instead of being destroyed, he casts them into a group of pigs. The demons then take the pigs, they possess them, and then they force them to drown themselves. They don't actually take action against these pigs, they make the pigs do it to themselves. So, it seems like because of its peaceful nature, it's not trying to coerce people into doing anything, and its monstrous appearance that the Mothman likely isn't a demon. It might seem like a cop-out to say that the cryptid might just be a cryptid, but there's actually a pretty solid biblical case to be made. A cryptid is any creature that may or may not exist. Usually, there's believed to be few of them, or even just one. There are many creatures in the Bible that fit that description. Job 40, 15-24 says, "Behold, behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold his strength in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze, his limbs like bars of iron." This is an account of the creature Behemoth. I'm inclined to believe that this creature is one of a kind, based on the wording surrounding it. There are multiple other accounts of creatures like this in the Bible. For example, Job 41 references the Leviathan, a creature of the sea, some sort of giant serpent-like creature. Verse 33 even explicitly states that Leviathan is a one-of-a-kind creature, stating, "On earth there is not his like." These creatures are only brought up in order to use them as metaphors, so if they exist, then it is likely that others exist that are not brought up within the Bible. Mothman could just be one of these creatures roaming the earth, though it is worth noting that for the most part these creatures are mentioned in parts of the Bible that aren't historical accounts and could very well just be metaphorical creatures that God is using to make a point, rather than actual creatures that he created. But if Mothman's a cryptid, then why is he appearing so many times in the same place, then disappearing after disaster? That seems like too big of a coincidence to me. So we established earlier that demons are actually the opposite of how they're portrayed in popular culture. The same's true for angels. While in pop culture, angels are usually portrayed as these beautiful looking people or babies and stuff like that, they're actually the one whose presence instills the most fear. Ezekiel 1:5-14 gives an account of an angel. It says, "Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, and every one had 4 faces, and every one had 4 wings, and their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass." The account goes on, but I think that's enough to say that seeing one of these creatures would be pretty frightening. Their appearance also seems to be fairly similar to the account of Mothman, an animal head and a human-like body with huge wings. Another piece of scripture that's relevant is Daniel 10. Verse 6 says, "His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude." And then verse 8 goes on to say, "I was left alone and saw this great vision, and no strength was left in me." So here we can see that the angel's presence was actually so frightening that it paralyzed Daniel. It's also worth noting that one of the most common features that appears in the accounts of the Mothman are his glowing red eyes, and this passage describes angels as having eyes like torches. There's also the famous "Be not afraid" verse, Luke 2:10, in which an angel has to command people not to be afraid of it despite its appearance. So the appearance and, for lack of a better term, aura of the Mothman definitely feels like it would be at home with the angels. Let's check out behavior. So the most common theory that I see about the Mothman is the one that we spoke of earlier from John Keel, and that's that the Mothman is an omen, and that his appearances in Point Pleasant were a warning of the disaster to come at the Silver Bridge. Now, angels are often used as omens or messengers of God. In Genesis 19, angels come down to Lot to warn him of Sodom's destruction. This is a pretty close parallel to the Mothman coming down to warn the people of Point Pleasant about the destruction of the bridge. That is sort of an omen, like the Mothman is supposed to be. In Luke 1:26-31, an angel brings a message to Mary. In Exodus 12:23, death follows the angel of destruction on Passover. There are many other cases like this throughout scripture. Sometimes the angels actually come as a sign of and the cause of the calamity, as is the case in 2 Samuel 24:15-17, 2 Kings 19:35, and Revelation 9:13-15. There are many other cases of this as well. And so with all of this in mind, looking at all 3 of the categories that we've defined here, it seems like the Mothman aligns mostly with angels in both appearance and behavior. And so I'm inclined to believe that from a biblical point of view, the Mothman would have to be an angel if it were to be real.